Hello, Anthony Smith here with a World Courier update focusing on how to ensure an unbroken pharmaceutical cold chain in times of global disruption. Today, I'm joined by Lloyd Henly, Regional Product Manager of Commercial Supply Chain in Western Europe, Middle East, and Africa for World Courier and AmerisourceBergen Company. Welcome, Lloyd.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
So, Lloyd, jumping into things, why is temperature control so important in today's pharma supply chain?
I think it's worth pointing out the key differences between the more traditional pharmaceuticals and biopharmaceutical products. Just to gain an understanding of what is driving the importance of temperature control. Both companies produce medicines. However, biotech products such as vaccines or orphan drugs, these are more targeted therapies derived from living organisms, while those made by traditional pharma companies are manufactured from chemicals and synthetic processes. Both have very different price points, and the product complexities are vastly different from a handling and storage perspective. So say traditional pharmaceuticals, headache tablets, they're mass produced, have a much lower price point, and they're far much more stable when it comes to temperature exposure, making that much easier to move through global supply chains. But then you look at the opposite, and when you consider biopharmaceuticals, so for example, orphan drugs, which I highlighted, these are a special subset of the biopharma industry. They target more specialized or chronic rare diseases, for much smaller patient populations. And not only do they, these products come at a significant cost, these large molecule targeted therapies, they're much more complex, they're sensitive products, much shorter shelf life, and very often require those strict handling and storage conditions, typically refrigerated 2 to 8 degrees, or even colder in many other examples. But, I'm sure we'll get on to that.
That's exactly it. I mean, you mentioned those temperatures and very strict handling. What's some of the consequences, or what's the consequence of temperature going out of range with a vaccine, for example, or any other pharmaceuticals for that matter?
Well, look, I've worked very closely with pharma supply chain leaders for many years, and I've often heard the phrase that supply chain is often an afterthought, and that to me highlights that there was either a less of a consideration, but really I think it was taken for granted, getting the product shipped to the patient on time and in temperature. And unfortunately, we've seen recent examples across the US, Europe, and other continents where vaccine batches have had to be destroyed. And that's due to poor logistics planning and handling, but whether that's because of untrained staff, insufficient packaging, or it could be a combination, throughout the supply chain. And it's such an important topic, and it's been really thrust into the limelight throughout this pandemic. If you don't get it right, the implications can be really unsettling. For example, if a product arrives in a thermal container and the dry ice is melted, obviously, depending on the stability of the product, this can have a profound effect on the efficacy and also the safety of the product, potentially rendering that unfit for the patient.
So, Lloyd, you mentioned a few variables there. How important is packaging and logistics in today's pharma supply chain to maintain temperature?
Well, you think, right, the drug portfolios I mentioned are increasingly diversifying. The demand has risen for more of an end-to-end service that provides tailored solutions for specific, and complex supply chain requirements, ensuring the right packaging is selected for the right product, for the right route. And that all has to be maintained within a transport network that's flexible, that's agile enough, and, to respond to last-minute variations, but also one that's built, their network on reputation, and a risk management process that ensures business continuity. But also, consider pallet shipments for, the higher value drug products, look at APIs or active pharmaceutical ingredients, which, these form the part of any drug that produces that intended effect, or it could be even finished biologics, let's say. Traditionally, active temperature control containers have served the industry extremely well for decades. But that technology, which is essentially electrical cooling and heating systems, it can malfunction. And when you rely on third parties to correctly handle these units, that could potentially break that cold chain. factor in the weight of the units, the return logistics, and also that extended rental period when you're trying to navigate local customs. It's no surprise then that local, or should I say supply chain leaders are looking to the advancements in technology, especially when passive systems can hold temperature now for 7 days or so to really add that new dimension in the pharma supply chain. But one last point on that, I often highlight that, you can have the most proficient advanced packaging system or solution in the market, but without the correct handling or logistics platform, with local effective operating procedures, that could negate any advancements in technology around packaging.
Great advice there. And just really thinking, it all starts upstream. And what type of advice would you have for pharma manufacturers and wholesalers to ensure product integrity remains in the cold chain?
That's a great question. And I mentioned how products and molecules are becoming more complex. So supply chains tend to include now multiple suppliers, more so than ever. And all of them are required to deliver their products with very detailed specifications. I mentioned portfolios are more specialist. The shelf lives of the products are much shorter, strict temperature requirements. So that traditional, let's say that silo model, that no longer works. So an all-encompassing solution, including packaging placement, pre-positioning, preconditioning, and end-to-end logistics is more essential than ever. Therefore, working with a single provider, I think organizations can secure the unbroken chain, ensure visibility across, every step in the supply chain. But one thing I've heard over the last 12 months or so is that our clients are telling us that the smaller, most localized logistics providers, they've really struggled to navigate through the pandemic. So that need for a global platform is more crucial than ever. One that's flexible, as I said, one that's agile enough to cope with these increasingly dynamic variables. So yeah, I would say ensure your logistics provider genuinely understands the consequences of failure or a break in the chain. Make sure they got the infrastructure as well to continually evolve and innovate to help move the medicine forward.
Lloyd, that's a lot of amazing points there. And thank you so much for joining us today and giving us more insight into this topic.
Thanks, Anthony.
Look out for more World Courier updates in the coming months, and thanks for watching.